of the Strategic Leadership Committee. If you want to say something, or if you want to move and second a motion, I would prefer if you used your hands, because that's what I'm going to follow. I find it hard to follow chat. And have we started recording yet?
We have started recording, yes.
Okay, that's fine. So if we can start, Craig, I'll throw to you in terms, if you can get us going. Thanks.
Tēnā koe, Councillor Scott. Nei te mihi kia koutou I tēnei wā, I tēnei hui o te komiti nei. Ai, tēnā koutou. Kia koutou nā memo o te hāpori e mā takitaki mai. Tēnā koutou, nā ringa raupa o te kaunihera, tēnā koutou, nā kaikaunihera hoki, tēnā tātou katoa. Ka huri au taku whakaaro ki ngā tini aitua, ko wehi atu ki te pō, haere. Rātou kia rātou, tātou kia tātou, te honga ora, tēnei te mihi kia koutou. Ka karakia tīmatanga o tātou nei hui, ka haia te ata, ka hāpara te ata, ka koro ki te manu, ka wareri te kutu, ko te ata nui, ka haaraina, ka taki te umere, he pō, he ao, ka watea, a tihei, mauri ora. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora tātou, thank you, Craig, for that. Can I just say, Jenny, be prepared to take over if you see me disappear. Not sure what's going on, but I did drop out for about 10 seconds during that introduction. So if you just be prepared for the fact that it may happen again. Thank you. Do we have any apologies?
There's one in the chat, Peter, from Megan for lateness.
Okay. And has anyone received an apology from Tuutaia Yvette Couch-Lewis?
Yvette's online, I think.
Is she? I can't see. So sorry about that, Yvette, if you're online. Okay, thank you. Any conflicts of interest? I'm not aware of any. So we'll move to 4 deputations and petitions. I'm sure we have not got a deputation or submission. So we'll move to 5, which is the minutes. And I'll first ask for points of accuracy in the minutes. So are there any points of accuracy? And if you wouldn't mind raising your hands if you have got accuracy matters that we need to address. There doesn't seem to be any. Are there any matters arising from those minutes? There don't seem to be any matters arising from the minutes. Do we have a mover and a seconder for the minutes, please, being accurate? Put your hand up, please. So moved by Councillor Mackay, seconded by Councillor Edge. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. And I'll take it that if you're against that, you'll put your hand up, but if you're for that, you'll just keep them down. So thank you for that. So moving to 6, which is matters for decision. 6.1. Which is an item that's going to be introduced by Jennifer Rochford. So Jennifer.
Kia ora koutou, ko Jennifer Rochford. Aho, thank you, Chair. Environment Canterbury is now delivering on the work agreed for year 1 of the long-term plan. And we're beginning the month 3, or in the beginning of month 3 of the financial year. We've opened our financial reporting systems for staff to do their monthly reporting on financials, and we will begin drafting the first quarterly report toward the end of this month. The quarterly report was updated for the last financial year and was well received by due to its focus on progress and achievements of the work program, and it's in a format that is engaging for the Waitaha community. But the 2021-31 long-term plan is an opportunity to make some additional improvements to ensure we're giving our community the full picture of our performance. So this LTP sets high expectations for delivery by Environment Canterbury. So we're proposing improvements to reporting that would provide visibility of some of the challenges or barriers to delivery and the mitigations, and also improve linkages between money spent and work delivered. So today we are seeking approval from the Regional and Strategic Leadership Committee on recommended additions to the quarterly portfolio performance report. And we would also like to hear your feedback on planned additional work over the longer term to improve performance reporting by measuring the effectiveness of our work programs through the identification of outcome measures and proxy measures. So I'll start with the recommended additions to the quarterly performance report. A conceptual report for one portfolio is attached as Appendix 1, and that's on pages 18 to 20 of the agenda. So the first new recommended addition is a summary table on progress of key portfolio initiatives. These are initiatives that really define the programs within the portfolio. They may have a significant budget, like our COVID-funded projects, or possibly a high interest from our community, like MAR, or represent a significant change in approach, like Meuda Rako. The second edition is a table of high-level risks and issues to delivery, and these represent the barriers to delivery and the mitigations or control that we are putting in place to manage the risk. The third recommended addition is a summary of financial performance. While the more detailed financial reporting will continue through the Audit, Finance, and Risk Committee, by including a financial summary in the quarterly, we can show better alignment between the money spent and the work delivered. And these three additions can be included in the Q1 report. The next thing is outcome measures. So we would also like to do some further improvements that we recommend are put in place over a longer period to help us measure the effectiveness of our work programs. And this would be based on the what success looks like statements in the long-term plan. We would use these statements to draft outcome measures, proxy outcome measures, and level of service measures or metrics. There's a table in your agenda that helps illustrate what this could look like on page 16 under point 17. However, please note that this is a concept only and should not be considered a recommendation by staff on wetland measures specifically. So in the long-term plan, in the biodiversity and biosecurity portfolio, there's a priority habitats and wetlands program. One of the success statements for this portfolio that links to this program is to increase wetland protection and regeneration to avoid further loss and promote the value of wetlands. So that's simply a word-for-word quote from the long-term plan about what we would like to achieve. So what we are proposing is to agree an outcome measure for the success statement that would give us a measure of effectiveness of our work on wetlands. For example, that outcome measure for wetlands could be no further loss of wetland area. And then some outcome measures take time to see a change. So we would also like to put in place proxy outcome measures that give us a more immediate measure of our effectiveness. So for example, we have a wetland campaign plan for year 1 of the long-term plan, and we could measure the number of landowners that have received communications regarding wetland benefits and regulatory requirements, or the number of wetland management plans in place, or the number of wetlands and their boundaries verified through a site visit. Then the third measure of effectiveness is one that we are required to do by the long-term plan. So each program has one or more levels of service measures and targets, but it makes sense to agree measures or metrics alongside the outcome measures, since there will likely be overlap. So for wetlands, there is a target to develop a wetland management plan for all Environment Canterbury funded wetland projects. So a level of service measure could be the number of wetland management plans in place for wetland projects funded by Environment Canterbury. So that is an example of what we would like to do for all the portfolios: outcome measures, outcome proxy measures, and level of service measures or metrics. This portion of the work will take more time to implement, There will be some measures that we already have in place, but there will be others that will require further work to report. And so we would like to phase this work in. And I should also mention that the Communications and Engagement Group is investigating ways of making the quarterly report information more accessible to a wider audience. And there is potential for more real-time reporting against measures as we put them in place. So thank you, Chair, and the Regional and Strategic Leadership Committee for considering these recommendations. Yoda.
Hey, thanks, Jen. It's a pretty interesting place. So at this point in time, we'll have some comment with Jennifer for clarification, and then we will step back and councillors will consider the items. So the first person we've got is Elizabeth.
Yep. Hi, Jennifer. Just a question around the outcome reporting and a comment. The outcome measure you've got there for wetlands. I see the suggested measure is no further loss. That's not actually equivalent to an increase in wetlands. So I presume there'd be another aim there around increasing wetland area. But my main question is, when would we be expecting a draft template for the outcome-based reporting to be brought to council? Would it be sort of, weeks or months, or when will that be?
At this point, we've only had some exploratory workshops to discuss the outcome measures and the proxy outcome measures. So I think weeks is probably optimistic, that maybe we're looking closer towards the, a month or more when we start to identify for all the portfolios what potential outcome measures and proxy measures could be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Phil.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. I just wasn't quite sure. Wasn't quite sure about how this kind of engagement and reporting will relate to the different committees, given that it's clear in the paper already that the portfolio concept is to work across different groups. But I just wondered if you could perhaps clarify as to how that might, in terms of reporting, so that, for example, the public can see how that relates to the different to the work of the different committees, how in fact that might be made clear.
I think from a reporting perspective that this type of reporting goes through Regional and Strategic Leadership Committee. David, please, or Taplin, please correct me if I'm incorrect, but I would anticipate that a discussion at the Natural Environment Committee or the other committees about the specific outcome measures and proxy measures could be had there, but all the reporting would go through the Regional and Strategic Leadership Committee.
I see. Thank you.
So just I guess for a point of clarification here also, it's just a comment. Is this conception? It's conceptual in terms of how we're going forward, and it's trying to uncover a format that's meaningful to councillors across portfolios, and providing the amount of I guess granularity that we require or you require across your committees. So we'll go to now, John.
Thank you. Just a question first, a little more explanation. I guess the cascading of the business cases of just how that's envisioned and how it's working as my first question.
Is there a specific cascade that you're concerned about? So we're looking at this going through our portfolio leadership groups.
I know probably a description of what it is and how it works rather than a specifics in any particular place.
Right. So the each of these is coming from a portfolio level. So reporting on specific. Sorry, John, I'm not sure I quite understand your question.
Look, can I help here? I mean, some of this is about our statutory function that we have across these things because of our LTP process that we have to look at, and the other stuff is about what is it you as councillors need to understand to give you clarity on some of these things? So this is conceptual in terms of that diagram there. So this conversation really needs to be about what else in here do we need to put in here to make it visible to you and meaningful to you. John, carry on.
I guess I'll just reframe the question is how do we define the business cascade process? So, and if I get it right, we're not just looking at a portfolio or a narrow silo, we're spreading the conversation across a bunch of different portfolios or business applications to give an outcome. I was just trying to get an understanding of what we viewed or defined, how we defined the business cascade rather than the specificity.
Do you want me to answer that one, Peter?
Yeah, go.
Jen, would that help? It's really, I guess it was bringing to councillors visibility a new way of working for us internally, just so you've got some understanding of what we've now done, which is taking the portfolio work from the long-term plan and actually then rolling that down within the organisation so that we're delivering across programs of work rather than previously where we'd sort of almost joined in the middle and we'd taken the functional work and the portfolio work and joined them together and we were working on part of programs. What we've now done is taken it from the portfolio level that you set for us in the long-term plan and we've worked that down into team plans and KPIs so that they can all roll back up for the reporting into those programs rather than coming back up always as portfolio reporting. And to Ian's point, I think in the chat there around the portfolio committee bit, what we're trying to do is actually bring you back programs of work reporting rather than necessarily linear portfolio reporting. Does that help, John? Does that clarify?
Absolutely. That was the explanation I was looking for, just to get an understanding. So no, thank you for that, and makes perfect sense. And I'll just note that the ongoing conversation around the role of audit and risk finance and where the delineation of reporting statutory and fiduciary duty sits in comparison to the reporting that comes into this committee, and I guess the role of audit and risk with a purview across all the activities of council given its statutory responsibilities. So just noting in public that that's an ongoing conversation to ensure that we don't get double ups of reporting, staff time and the like, and get an understanding of our roles. So thank you.
Okay, Councillor Edge.
Thanks, Jennifer. I think this is a really good step in the right direction, and it's obviously you're progressing through things as well. Yeah, the whole idea that you've talked about, that stuff on page 16, sounds really good, and just obviously fine tuning those things. For me, just a minor comment about the key portfolio initiatives table that you've got there. I would find it really useful for under each of those initiatives to identify the level of service number and convey the progress on each of those level of service numbers so that it's really clear about, and that can probably be followed through on the financial side of things, that X dollars allocated to, say, two-year program 31.2, and how you're progressing on that. So it's really just, but I think that those key elements are pretty much there, and I really appreciate what you're doing here. It's great.
Thank you, Vicky.
Thanks, Peter. Jennifer, I'm just interested in whether we'll be able to also track through this some of the more detailed things or specifics that have come through our long-term plan deliberations and agreement that are not necessarily, are not a big part of a program, but are nevertheless a change from what was before. So, for example, I'm thinking about our under-19s concession so that under-19s have access to a childfare. We also had express buses that were supported through the long-term plan back in May, June. And so will we be able to track the progress on actually implementing those things, which are albeit small parts of our budget, but nevertheless, like, it's something different from what we had previously?
I would think that we would be tracking that through more of the briefing or additional presentations to the committees or to council. And that's where you can get the more detailed information, where this quarterly report is meant to be much more of a high level overview of how we're performing in general as Environment Canterbury against the long-term plan. And that detail will come as a separate briefing.
Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
I think just tying in the comment or the question that Vicky's just asked with the previous comment of John, I think the important thing for me is to actually understand the difference of the roles of this committee, and this reporting back is at a high level rather than the detail, and I think the detail needs to actually come through the new Audit, Risk and Performance Committee or Financial Committee. So am I correct in that understanding, Tafflin? You're nodding your head, so that's good. I think we just need to be careful that this is high level and any detail goes through another committee, which has statutory roles and independence, as John alluded to in his comment.
Thank you, Nicole.
Kia ora, Peter. Yeah, I just kind of want to echo what Claire's just said, and also John's comments. You know, we have the Grahams on the audit committee for a specific reason. I wouldn't want to see information coming to this committee on finance and risk that hasn't first been through that audit committee to ensure that everything's above board and we've given it the due diligence that is necessary for us to be good managers.
Yeah, no, they're all. Sorry, Ian.
Thanks, Peter. I think we need to move the reporting away from portfolios and to committee, to align with the committees. And I understand from the finance committee that that's complicated and it's a long-term thing. But while we still refer to portfolios and portfolio delivery and they sit across different committees, we've got misalignment, which is going to cause problems in terms of accountability. And I don't like that system. So I think, you know, over time we have to stop talking about portfolios and talk about committee responsibilities. Secondly, I like the direction you're moving here in terms of trying to produce a bit better reporting system in terms of accountability. I'm not sure we still go quite far enough in terms of, well, there's two issues, and I think Liz referred to one of them, and that is how we report on stuff. So what are our targets? And it was evident in the CWMS report that you can be in a mindset where nothing's changed, where you're not confident enough about things that have changed. So you say targets haven't been met, when in fact, a lot of the cases, targets have been met. They're just not quite, the data supporting that position is not quite set in concrete. So you've got to have a bit more nuances in how we report on progress, I think, to a degree. And secondly, I think, and it goes to Vicky's point about public transport, but it's across all committees really, and it's about financial accountability. It's actually a degree of analysis as to where a dollar spent, let's say, on, and if we use Vicky's example of providing free buses to under-19s, where's the analysis going to be in terms of how much benefit we've accrued, whether it's through climate change or whatever the metric is we're going to use to measure the success of that program, other than just it feels good. And so I think, you know, this is a good first step, but it's not the end game. There's quite a lot of work to be done to get to the point where there's a full level of A, accountability, alignment with our responsibilities, and C, financial reporting about how we're spending our ratepayers' money.
Thanks, Ian. And thank you, Jen. I'll get you to step back now. I think we've probably covered a fair bit of ground already. So thank you for your report and the bits that it's uncovered. My comment would be this has been a useful discussion from our point of view, and I think uncovering the role of PAR for everyone, you know, is really important for us. I'm not a member of PAR. I trust that PAR has got the, you know, has got the financial reporting for the entity, the regional council. But my responsibility, I guess, also as a co-chair and Megan's as a deputy chair of regional leadership, is that we need to understand the portfolios that we have responsibility for are tracking along the way that we think they should be tracking. And so the information that we get in these tables allows us to inquire along those, you know, along those lines and have a discussion along those lines, which we're expected to do. So, I mean, that's how I see it. I'm not wanting to take PAR over. You're more than welcome to have PAR, but we just need to understand something. And I trust that Giles and I was going to say Miles actually, but Giles and Stephanie and the senior leadership team and the PAR committee will sort this through, and it will cascade down to where it needs to be. Phil.
Well, I certainly think this is a really good way of doing things in terms of reporting. My question earlier relates to what Ian raised, and that is it's pretty clear that this should be an interim kind of transition step. And we just have so many resources and just establishing new committees. But I just think that eventually the reporting should be aligned to all of the committees, and that's something which we as a council should endeavour to work towards. But well done on this piece of work at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other discussion that's required on this from councillors, between councillors? As I say, Jen has stepped back. And Jenny, do you want to make a comment? You don't?
No, but I'll move the resolution if you like.
Yeah, no, that's great. So we've got the resolutions on page 14, which are resolutions 1, 2 and 2.2. So Jenny's prepared to move that. Could someone raise their hand to second it, please? No hands up yet. So Councillor Clearwater is seconding that. All those in favour say aye. If you're against, put your hand up. So that is carried. So thank you very much, Jen, and thanks, Taflin. I think this has been a really worthwhile discussion, and hopefully that you've got something out of it that we can take away and work on. So you happy?
Yes, thank you, Kia ora.
Yeah, thanks, Taf. Okay, now, excuse me, moving to 6.2, and this is the process around council submissions, and Olivia Cook is going to speak to this. So welcome, Olivia.
Marina, councillors and tūmetae. So I'll just briefly cover off the main points of the paper before inviting any sort of questions of clarification. So this paper recommends a new process for development and sign out of council submissions. And the request is for the Regional and Strategic Leadership Committee to adopt the process. And that process is outlined in the diagram on page 23 of the paper. And if I step back and just briefly summarise some of the drivers for considering a change to the process. We've recently had council establish 4 new standing committees and 1 subcommittee. And some of the benefits of those new committees are that they allow the committee to focus on a particular area of attention. So, for example, the Natural Environment Committee focusing on matters relating to the natural environment. And also those committees we recognise have a broader membership, so they include tūmetae, and they enable those perspectives to be taken into account when making decisions. But also, at the same time, we're starting to see a real uptick in the number of consultations coming out from central government particularly, and they're typically subject to very short timeframes. And we're also operating in a much more uncertain environment. So if we think about the COVID situation, all of this is sort of suggesting that we need a more flexible and agile process for developing the council submissions. And so that's what's led to the driver around this paper. And at paragraph 5 in the paper, there's a set of principles that have guided staff's thinking around how the process should be developed. And I won't go through those, but I just wanted to emphasise that what staff are trying to do here is really strike a balance between an efficient, agile process but also make sure that there's sufficient time and opportunity for committees to input into the submission. And so page 23, that sets out the actual process. So it's 3 steps. The first step is really staff looking at the proposal, identifying where there's an overlap between standing committee's purpose in terms of reference and the subject matter of the proposal. And then staff would provide advice to the council chair and the CE on who should be engaged with in terms of the standing committees. Step 2 is the process for engaging with the committee. And through that process, staff would provide an overview of the proposal, the key dates and milestones, and steps in the process. And that would include a summary of key themes, recommended submission points, and opportunity for all committee members to feedback on those proposed submission points. And then finally, the sign out process. It's a hierarchical process, I guess, in terms of its the preferred option is to take the submission to the committee for sign out. If that's not possible due to timeframes, it would go to a council meeting. And if that doesn't align with timeframes, then it would be signed out under delegated authority by the council chair or deputy chair. So that was really just the main points of the submission of the paper. So if there are any points of clarification, happy to take those.
Okay, thanks, Olivia. So yeah, again, if we're going to have a substantive discussion on this, we'll wait till Olivia pushes back. So Councillor Mackay. Are you there, Claire? Move to
Sorry
Councillor.
about that. Just a question of clarity for Olivia. To date, or in the last several instances around submissions, we have actually changed the recommendations to be signed out by the chair and deputy chair, which is a little different to what I've just heard you say. Are you actually in the recommendation here just looking for one name, or the 2 chair and deputy as we have actually agreed to in the last couple of months anyway?
Not intending to change the process around that. So I can see Chair Huey's got her hand up. Do you want me to pause?
Go, Jenny.
Yeah, the reason that I've been including Peter lately is just because I've felt that it's good to have 2 people. But I think technically you should have the chair, and then it's up to the chair whether they want to include the other person. So most places have it signed off by the chair. I was trying to work on a cooperative manner.
I think
and
you'll
I continue to do that.
Can I just note that it's yours, that's the chair's signature on this, so chair's discretion, I guess. Yeah, sorry, can we go back to you, Liv?
So sorry, yes, so no intent to change the process there. And I guess that it's one point that could be discussed here is what the preference is. We've been trying to just streamline it to make sure that we had at least one person signing out the submission, but if there's a desire for a chair and a deputy chair, and if the council is happy with that, then that could be amended.
Yeah, we'll discuss that once you push back. I think, Olivia, thank you. John.
A question of clarification for me. In the first step of the process, it talks about staff, I guess, coordinating, bringing together information, and then bringing it to council or the chief executive chair. I'm just the question in my mind is that in a sense an all of council briefing consensus of information that comes forward, or is it a consensus of a particular portfolio of a view? And my question is just to ensure that we don't end up in a silo in our thinking of what our submission should be, and to ensure that, I guess, consequence or potential consequence is understood across the breadth of the council business. So just a question of the breadth of conversation prior to that information first coming to, I guess, governance.
Sure. If I reflect back on the recent process, what we are looking to do is really just provide some advice to the council chair and the CE, and I would assume that that would then be the impetus for discussion between the council chair and the CE with the rest of the council. So it's really just to make it slightly informal, to recognise that actually we won't have sufficient time most of the time to get this through a process which I guess formalises the recommendation.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm sort of just going back to our previous conversation where we're now going to sit down and have a conversation about audit and risk and its role and space. So just for me, it's trying to have as much information into the conversation early across the organisation rather than getting to a point where we have to go back out and find further information because we're challenged. So that was just my question of how that fits into a broad conversation if decisions are going to be made in a committee rather than maybe all of council where you may have more officers of council sitting in on a conversation.
Thanks, John. Jenny, did you have something else that you wanted to say now?
Yeah, look, I just want to say that it's sort of been said, but look, clearly all submissions should be signed off by a committee with delegated authority for that area or the council, and they have to go back to the council, and it's clearly explained in this report that that's going to happen. But where there's not time, it'll have to be signed off in retrospect, and the chair has to take into consideration what the views of everybody is from the discussion that's been had. And that's the only way to get it timely in sequence with the committees or the decision making. But it clearly has to be signed off by council, either in retrospect or before you send it in.
Okay, we'll go to that substantive discussion in a minute. Phil, have you got a clarification point?
Oh, Mike, yeah, I have. It is in effect, and this is the report's really timely, and it refers, I guess, mainly to the new standing committees. I'm just not quite sure, but I've assumed that, for example, current or previous standing committees, like, for example, the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee, that in relation to any submission, that the same kind of processes and principles would apply.
Yep. Thank you. Look, Olivia, thank you for this. Thank you for the report. You can step back now and we can have this discussion amongst councillors about this. I think we've covered a bit of that ground, but I think I would like to reiterate what the chair has said, that this process sometimes becomes quite rushed and we don't get the opportunity to run it past the right people. But in any event, like the Essential Freshwater Farm Planning one that we're doing at the moment, that will go to the Environment Committee. As Claire as chair of that will be the drafting gate, if you like, before it gets to the chair and anyone else she wants to nominate to help her with that. But it's her signature on it at the end of the day, so she needs to be happy with it. And the thing that we would like to point out is these submissions are what best reflects Environment Canterbury's position on these things. It's not what individual councillors might want in it, but what best reflects our position. There is an opportunity in terms of the process that we've just been through with the MBA submission that we did on Monday to send that submission in and then look to speak to it and then summarise your thoughts on that. So that process is available also, and others consider on that. So I see you've got your hand up again. Jenny, would you like to talk about that or speak about
I just want to talk about an issue that was raised with me about the content of the report, and that's to do with, if you have a look at page 23, and this was raised in the earlier discussion by Councillor Mackenzie, paragraph 8. And my thinking is that paragraph 8 is actually superfluous to the report. It's just staff trying to be extra helpful, because that's really a backroom process matter that we normally, I don't think, would need to cover off in a report, because we're not supposed to be doing it by consensus decision making. We're supposed to be doing it by the what's set out in paragraph 6 above, which is very, very clear, the consultation process, and it should come back to committees. So that's just our staff trying to be very helpful there. So That's not part of the actual formal decision, but I think that report, that's paragraph 8, could be deleted from the report, as could the one that's set out in the risk 10A. But since that's not part of the actual decision-making resolution, we might get some advice from whoever's there giving advice about how we should do that. I think we could just note it, that those two parts are superfluous to the report.
So,
but I can move that as an amendment if that's what's thought the best thing to do. But that isn't actually part of the actual resolution itself. But I'll foreshadow that I'm going to move that up as part of the resolution.
okay, so that is something that's can stand on its own. And Grant, is your comment around that, or have you got another comment?
No, my comment was to thank the team for getting this before us. I've really liked the format that we're being asked to provide some feedback on those various submissions. You know, that the format and the landscape format where we have the issue, staff advice, and then a column for us to make some comment and get it back to people. I find that really easy to understand and a really good process. So thanks for that. And this seems to be following on from that idea as well. Okay,
so Councillor Clearwater, is yours about clause 8?
Not specifically, no.
Just okay, carry on then.
Oh, I'd also like to thank the staff for preparing this so clearly, because it always is helpful to have clear processes, and especially because there is so much being required of us as a council by way of submissions, and there's now clear opportunity and ways for each of us as councillors to be involved with that decision making, with the submission making process. I think that in terms of the section on risks, members are not having an opportunity to input in the submission. Now with these processes, clearly that reduces that risk significantly. I would point out though that, as we know, not all of the committees are committees of the whole, and in my view, in time to make sure we mitigate that risk, so that, for example, especially around the important area of finance, that at some stage we need to look at how, in fact, that committee also is going to be able to have as much input as possible, especially perhaps in relation to any submission from all councillors. That's my view. But thank you very much for the report. I think it'll lead to some good processes for us.
Okay, we'll go to Councillor Mackay and then we'll ask Catherine Shackey to comment, please. Councillor Mackay.
Peter, can I talk after Catherine, please? I think she's possibly going to cover some of my stuff off, but my other comment is really when we get into discussion. So when we get there, I'll come back.
That's fine. And I haven't got chat. I've only got hands up, so I haven't seen anything that Catherine's written. So Catherine, if you'd like to speak now.
Kia ora, committee councillors Tumutayo. My view is that this committee can't amend the report. It's a staff report, but your resolutions can pick up what you've proposed, and there's a couple of options there. The first is that you simply note that paras 8 and 10A reflect process and not part of your resolutions, and then that when this report and these proposals go to council for the council to adopt this process, that these parts of the report not be included.
Thank you, Catherine. Jenny, do you want to comment on that and how, since you've raised this, how you would like to handle this?
Oh, that's where I was going. I was looking for Catherine for advice. I alluded to that in what I said, and so I knew she'd come and say that. So I've got a resolution saying that we'll note that at the end of that, because that's right. You cannot amend the staff report, and that was what was concerning me. So thank you, Catherine, for coming on and saying that.
So we'll wait until we do the recommendations, and then you can just before that you can bring that up. So Councillor Mackay, your issue, please.
Are we into open discussion now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, one of the ones that I'd just like to broach, it isn't covered in this paper, but yeah, thanks staff for presenting the paper and the process to date. One of the pieces that I think that we have missed, and maybe we could discuss now, if this was the appropriate place, was who would be the speakers should any of these submissions go to a select process at central government.
Happy you do that now, Claire.
Okay, so my feeling is that as most of these submissions are signed off by our chair, or in that if that's not suitable or can't be done, it'll most likely be our deputy chair. I think that there's a very important role that our leadership, which is the chair and deputy chair, are the people that actually probably are the ones that present at select committee processes. It just shows the importance that we take to all these submissions, that we put a lot of time and effort into and getting our view across. So that's sort of a position statement that I've got, and I just wonder if it's something that we either add in today in a recommendation, or maybe we could bring it back to a full council paper if there was support for that.
Thank you for that, Claire. Look, it certainly is the default position that Jenny and I have gone to in terms of this. I've pretty much made sure that where the opportunity was, that we made our submission in person, along with the relevant staff member. For example, Olivia was with us on Monday, and so was Grant for the NBA submission. When we did the tenure review submission, Cameron Smith and myself did that in person. And I think we should continue that. Look, I'm not holding any flag for wanting to do it, but I think exactly what you've just said. I think we should pay due respect to the process. Claire, sorry, Jenny.
I totally agree with Claire. That's what we should be doing. And I think it's actually an unstated, that is the role of the chair and the deputy to do that. And if you read the LGNZ handbook on the role of the chair, that is exactly what it says I should be doing, and any chair should be, and is certainly the deputy chair involved in that as well. So I totally agree with you, Claire. So I'm not sure that we need any extra reporting around that. But if people felt we did, we could do a chair's report around that and have that in it if you like. But I think as long as everybody's in agreement. Thanks very much for raising it, actually.
Claire.
So yeah, I mean, look, I'd be happy if it was just noted in today's paper. If it's taken for granted that that's the situation, then I'd be just happy if it's just noted.
All right, I'll add that. Oh, Peter, it's Jenny again. I'll just add that on to the noting that I'm writing out here.
You better hurry up because we're just about there, actually.
Well, I can do it now if you like. Yeah, when you're ready.
So can I just check with everybody else? Everybody else is reasonably comfortable with that in terms of council and Tumutai, our positions on this?
Yeah, I'm fine, Peter. I think I expect it to be a bit of a given for the chair, deputy chair to attend those submissions in person with support from staff and the sort of the lead councillor who might be involved with the issue as well, if that's the case.
Cool. Well, we'll note the fact that this is on page 21. There's one recommendation there that says that council adopts a new process for development and sign-out of council submissions as outlined in the diagram for the development of the council submissions, which forms part of this paper. So Jenny, I'll put this in your hands now in terms of.
Okay, so I'd like to move the resolution. So is there a second, with an amendment? And the amendment is noting that paragraph 8 on page 23 and the risk identified in paragraph 10A on on page 24 we request the staff to actually delete those paragraphs as they're superfluous to the decision-making process.
Okay, thank you. So can I just check?
Sorry, Peter, there'll be a second note.
Yes.
Note that the chair and the deputy will make a practice of presenting the oral submissions wherever possible.
Okay, so thank you. So we'll go to, so Juliet, are you happy with where you're at with this and capturing this? Because this will be amendment and we'll go to the amendment first, and we'll get a mover and a seconder for that, and then we'll be part of the substantive motion, and then we'll pass that. Are you happy with that, Juliet?
Yeah, and I can send you in the words in a minute if you want me to.
Cool. And you'll see the minute later too.
Yeah.
Okay, Jenny, so you're moving that amendment?
Yeah.
You've got a seconder for that? Councillor Clearwater? All those in favour?
Not necessarily. I just want, my hand was up actually just to ask if Jenny might read that carefully again. I inferred that it meant that we delete the paragraph, and I don't think that was the intention. But if it could be read again for clarity, please.
No, yes, that we note that paragraph 8 on page 23 and the risk identified in paragraph 10A on page 24 be removed.
No, we're not removing them.
We request staff to remove them.
Jenny, can I just comment? I thought Catherine and I thought you had agreed with Catherine's comments that in fact we shouldn't seek to remove part of the report itself. What you just said sort of implies that we would.
I think we can ask staff to do that, but Catherine, can you come back on and tell us?
Jenny, in the chat, I've proposed a slight amendment to your amendment, if you'll forgive me, and that is the committee notes that para 8 on page 23 and the risk identified on para 10, and I've made a typo there, A on page 24, be removed. Oh, sorry, when this report is brought to the council for discussion and possible approval. And in fact, it should be the committee requests or agrees that. So the committee agrees.
I totally agree. Do that, and that's exactly what you should be doing. So thank you very much, and that's for you, Juliet. And then the second one actually says that we note about the chair and the deputy will make a practice of orally presenting the submissions wherever possible.
Okay, so Catherine, can you just, for my purposes, please go through that again?
The committee agrees that para 8 on page 23 and the risk identified in para 10A on page 24 be removed when this report is brought to the council for discussion and possible approval.
Okay, you happy with that, Phil? And Jenny?
Yes,
I'm happy to second it on that basis.
Okay, and so we'll just put the second bit is to this amendment is regarding the chair and deputy chair. So we'll take it all as one amendment. Okay, so you're going to move that, Jenny. Phil's going to second it. All those in favour, don't put your hand up. All those against, put your hand up. Okay, so that's carried. So that now becomes part of the substantive motion, which will read, adopts a new process of development and sign out of council submission as outlined in the diagram for development of council submissions, which forms part of this paper and then includes the amendment that we've just voted on. So I've got a move. Can I have a mover for that, please? Are you moving that, Phil?
Happy to, yep.
And a seconder would be, and Jenny seconding that. All those in favour? All those against, put your hand up. And that is carried. So Juliet, you can work with Catherine in terms of making sure that lines up properly. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're moving on to 6.3, which is the verbal councillors update. And this is pretty straightforward. This was something that we've had on the table that we do not want to progress. And so we want to remove that from the table. And I would ask Catherine Shaki, if you've got an opinion on that we're doing the right thing here, and then we can discuss it. Or not discuss it.
Kia ora anō. As you'll recall at the last committee meeting, this report was left on the table, which of course is a very plain way of expressing what your intention was, that this report be considered at a future meeting. The resolutions as you see them are proposing a more formal way of lifting this resolution or this paper from the table, dealing with it and finalising your approach to it. So the recommendations there are you note that this item wasn't considered. and you now resolve it shouldn't be considered further and no further action be required.
Thank you, Catherine. That's pretty straightforward as far as I'm concerned. Are there other comments from councillors? There doesn't seem to be. Do I have a mover for that, please, then? That recommendation on page 25, which is in two parts.
I'm happy to move that.
Yeah, moved by Councillor Edge, seconded by Tumutaio Cranwell. All those in favour? All those against, raise your hand. So that is carried. Thank you. And now we're moving to 7.1. I think you're going to do this, Taflin, which is this is information item. So there's no decision required here, councillors. So we will, after this, we will look for clarification from Taflin if required. So it's the Engagement Solutions Progress Update. Taflin.
Thank you, Peter, and forgive me if I'm looking away from the screen because my papers are on the other screen. So while I look at that one. So firstly, yep, through you, Chair, I'll take the paper as read and just highlight a couple of points. The purpose of the paper is to keep this committee informed of the work that's being done to implement the engagement, significance and Māori participation policy that was adopted alongside the long-term plan, and just to note the levels of service that are relevant to that piece of work. So under the terms of reference of this committee, you've got oversight of the engagement activity of the organisation. This isn't engagement activity per se, but it is background work. So we wanted to just bring it for your information so you can have some visibility on what's being done behind the scenes to enable staff to implement the policy that came in 1 July. So the paper's split into two halves, roughly. The first half up to item 16 is really looking at the work that's being done to upskill the organisation so that the community has a consistent experience when engaging with us and, as I said, to implement the policy. And we've just grouped those items into engagement, significance and Māori participation so you can see what's being done under those three broad areas. So the work's being led by Claire Fletcher, who's online. So if you've got any questions, I might have to throw to Claire as the expert in this space. And Claire's been working with a group of internal engagement practitioners, but also seeking some input from case studies around New Zealand and Australia to inform the work that we're doing, and has been developing a number of tools, and we'll have a kete of tools for the organisation alongside some training, and that'll go live in a couple of weeks to our internal group of testers, and then it'll roll out after that. And the second half of the paper just quickly draws attention to levels of service, and obviously community engagement is in most of the levels of service in the long-term plan, but there are three specific targets which are noted in the paper that relate to this piece of work as well. So thanks, Peter. That probably covers it for me, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Taflin, and acknowledging also that Claire's online. So councillors that have a comment or some clarification required, please raise your hand. You're going to get away pretty lightly here, I think. Councillor Clearwater.
Thank you, Taflin, and there's some really good ideas there, and thank you very much for the report. I see it as being really proactive, and I just wondered that with reference to the concept of the People's Panel, which I think is great, I just wondered if we might be able to sort of trial something in relation to bus users or bus patrons. There've been a number of requests to have a passenger advisory sort of group established. I just wondered if there might be an opportunity to actually run with that.
Thank you, Councillor Clearwater. We're actually bringing the People's Panel back to you following the workshop, the first workshop that we did, and we've got a briefing in to bring that back to you. But there is also a briefing coming up for you around public transport engagement in its entirety. So there'll be an opportunity to explore that in both of those briefings, if you're comfortable.
Sorry, Taflin. Chair Huey, do you comment on People's Panel? No.
No, that's all good. Thank you, Peter.
Okay. There are no more hands up there, Taflin. So Can we just, which you've done really well, actually. So can we just move to the 26 on page 26 and note the report updating the Regional Strategic Leadership Committee on actions underway to support implementation of the engagement, significance and Māori participation policy and to progress the associated levels of service. Can I have someone move that, please? And a second, moved by Tumutao Cranwell and seconded by Councillor Southworth. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, put your hands up. So that's through, that's passed. Look, we're at the end now, so there are no notices of motion. There is no extraordinary business that I'm aware of. Are there any questions from councillors? There don't seem to be any questions. The next meeting of this committee will be on Thursday, the 4th of November, and hopefully that'll be in person. And I look forward to that, actually. It's getting a bit tiring. And can I just go to Councillor Pauling, please, to finish us out with.
Kia ora, Peter. Ka nui te mihi kia koutou mō koutou mahi I tēnei ata mō tēnei committee, ai tēnei te mihi kia koutou. Ai he karakia whakamutunga o tātou nei hui. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki tūru unu a tāne, kia wātea, te māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua I te ara takata, koi ara e rongo whakairi aki ki ruka kia tīna, haumie hui e tā ki.
Yeah, thank you very much.